My name is Ellaner Mitchell, though most folks in Detroit still call me Miss Ellie, like I'm a song they used to know. I'm 63 years old, a retired history teacher, and for most of my life I've avoided one place: the river. If you've ever tried to outrun a memory, stay with me for a minute. Maybe you'll see how it always finds its way home. It was supposed to be simple. I drove down Jefferson Avenue to take pictures of the old Mitchell house, the building my late husband, Marcus, once loved, the same one our eldest son, Caleb, and his wife, Aisha, plan to sell to a development company next week. $25 million for a patch of riverfront that still remembers my son Malik's last breath. But when I stepped out of the car, the air shifted. The Detroit River was silver and restless, the kind of water that hums secrets. Then it came, the sound that stopped me cold. A single drumbeat rolled from inside the building, slow and deliberate, like a pulse awakening the ghosts of everything I'd tried to forget. If you've ever heard your past call your name, don't turn away. That's where my story begins. Caleb kept saying the same thing all week. Mom, this isn't about the past. It's about opportunity. He said it like a line from a seminar, slick and certain. His wife, Aisha, added her polished smile, the kind that could sell sunlight to the sky. It's time Detroit looks forward, Mrs. Mitchell. The developers want to honor your family name. Think of what Marcus would want. She spoke Marcus's name like a bargaining chip, not a memory. I nodded because it was easier than arguing. Since Marcus died 6 months ago, they've all treated me like fragile glass. Pretty, but dangerous to touch. Every family dinner turned into a strategy meeting, every silence a reminder that I was the only one still living with ghosts. They wanted me to sign away the land, to free them from the weight of its story. So I promised them I'd just take the pictures, meet the realtor, and go home. One afternoon, that's all. But promises are light things when grief still sits heavy. As I parked by the iron gate of the Mitchell house, camera in hand, the air thick with rain and river salt, I already knew deep down I was lying to all of us. The moment my fingers touched the cold iron gate, the past breathed out from beneath it. The lock gave way too easily, like someone had oiled it for me. Inside the courtyard, I expected dust and decay, but the bricks gleamed with fresh paint. Mural colors stretched across the side wall. Turquoise, indigo, deep river blue, forming the face of my son Malik, smiling the same crooked grin he had the summer before he drowned. Across the mural, in neat white script, it read, Malik's blue. Every life lifted, another soul saved. Sevens. The air vibrated with the sound of drums coming from inside the building, layered and alive, like thunder taught to keep rhythm. I froze. This was no empty relic. It was breathing. Through the tall windows I caught glimpses of motion. Children tracing dance steps, a man hammering boards, a woman stringing prayer flags between rafters. Everything pulsed with purpose. I should have been comforted. Instead, my heart raced with something closer to fear. Someone had turned our private grave of memories into something thriving, something beautiful, and no one had told me. For a moment, I stood there, wind tugging my scarf, the river murmuring behind me, and I whispered, Marcus, what have you done? Sevens. A woman stepped out from the front doors, just as I gathered the nerve to enter. Tall, steady, wrapped in a denim apron splattered with paint, she carried the quiet confidence of someone who belonged here. Mrs. Mitchell? she asked, her voice low, warm, certain. "We've been expecting you." "Sevens." For a second, I thought she had the wrong person. No one had expected me anywhere for a long time. But she smiled like she knew my hesitation. "I'm Marisol Grant," she said. "I help run this place. The Mitchell house hasn't been empty for years." Sevens. Behind her, laughter echoed. A child's bright squeal, the metallic rhythm of drumsticks hitting tin, the hum of a world rebuilt from sorrow. I looked at the mural again, at Malik's face framed in blue, at the sign above the doorway reading the Mitchell House Community Center. My knees almost gave out. Marisol reached for my hand. "You should come in, Mrs. Mitchell. There's someone who's been waiting a long time to meet you." Sevens. The wind off the river caught my breath as I stepped inside, and for the first time in 30 years, I didn't run from the sound of water. If I'd known what waited on the other side of that door, I might have turned back, but by then, the past had already opened the door for me. Inside the Mitchell house, the air was thick with echoes of life. Drums pulsing faintly from the basement, the smell of cornbread drifting from the kitchen, laughter bouncing down the hallway. I followed Marisol through the maze of rooms that once stood silent and broken. Now, they were alive. Children painted bright murals over cracked walls. Veterans fixed old chairs in the workshop. A woman tuned a guitar while humming a gospel melody. "Your husband built this," Marisol said gently. "He called it a place for second chances." Sevens. Her words made my stomach twist. Marcus, my Marcus, had been coming here for years, while I'd believed he couldn't stand the sight of this house. Every chipped brick, every repainted wall whispered his name. Marisol led me toward a narrow staircase curling upward. "There's something else," she said. "Up in the old bell tower. He told me it was for you." Sevens. The stairs creaked beneath our feet as we climbed, sunlight spilling through dusty windows. My chest ached with every step, fear and hope tangling like vines. When we reached the top, Marisol pushed open a small wooden door. The air inside smelled like cedar and memory. And in the center of the room, waiting on a small table, was a carved wooden box with my name on it. Ellie. The box was smooth beneath my fingers, carved from walnut, the letters of my name inlaid with tiny mother-of-pearl pieces. My throat tightened before I even lifted the lid. Inside were stacks of envelopes, bundled with ribbon, hundreds of them, each dated carefully in Marcus's neat handwriting. One letter every month for 30 years. Beneath them sat a small leather-bound journal, edges worn soft, corners darkened by time. Marisol stood quietly by the door, giving me space. "He made me promise to keep them safe," she said. "Said they belonged to you when you were ready to listen again." Sevens. I untied the first bundle, hands trembling. The top envelope read, July 1995. I opened it slowly, my breath catching as his handwriting came alive before me. "My dearest Ellie," it began. "The house feels different without you. The air carries your silence. I told myself I came back to fix the roof, but the truth is, I came to fix something inside me. I found a man sleeping in the barn. Anthony, a veteran, eyes hollow as the sky. I let him stay. Maybe helping him will help me, too." Tears blurred the words. Each letter was a confession, a chronicle of grief turning into purpose. September 1997. The children painted the old walls. Their laughter fills the halls, where our silence used to live. He had written me a map of his healing, one letter at a time. Marisol finally spoke, her voice soft. He used to say these letters were love songs to two things: his wife and this city. Sevens. I closed the box carefully, pressing my palm against the lid, as if I could still feel the warmth of his hands there. For the first time in decades, I didn't just miss him. I began to understand him. When I stepped outside again, the late afternoon light washed the courtyard in gold. The air smelled of river salt and fresh paint. Down the hill, the Detroit River shimmered like it was holding its breath. Marisol followed me quietly until we reached the new wooden dock stretching out from the shore. He called it Malik's blue, she said softly. Said it was the color of forgiveness. Sevens. The dock was sturdy, newly built, but I could still see the ghost of the old boards beneath it, the ones where my son had once stood, laughing, just before the world broke. I felt my chest tighten, the air sharp and cold despite the sun. Children splashed in the shallow water, their laughter rolling over the waves. A one-legged man stood nearby, whistle around his neck, guiding them as they learned to float. That's Coach Deshaun Price, Marisol explained. Your husband trained him to teach swim safety to neighborhood kids. Said every child deserved to know the water without fear. Sevens. I watched them, those children, those small hands cutting through the surface that had once stolen everything from me. And something inside me cracked open. The fear that had kept me away for 3 decades began to shift, to loosen. On the riverbank, flowers surrounded a bronze plaque at the mural's base. For every life lifted from the water, Malik's spirit rises higher. I knelt beside it, tracing my son's name with trembling fingers. He turned our pain into this, I whispered. Marisol nodded. He said healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means giving what broke you a new purpose. Sevens. And for the first time in years, I believed her. Before I could stand, a familiar voice called from behind. Mrs. Mitchell. It was Theo, carrying a small bouquet of daisies, his grin wide and unguarded. It's Tuesday, he said proudly. I brought flowers for Malik. Mr. Marcus said flowers help him see the colors in heaven. Sevens. I took them from his hands, my throat tightening. He was right, I said, arranging the blooms at the base of the mural. Theo knelt beside me, brushing dust from the plaque with gentle care. Mr. Marcus told me blue was Malik's favorite color. He said blue is the space between sadness and peace. Sevens. I blinked back tears. He was right about that, too. Sevens. Marisol joined us, her voice quiet. Theo helped your husband build this dock. You know, he never missed a single week of flowers. Sevens. Theo smiled proudly. Every Tuesday. Even in the snow. Mr. Marcus said promises mean more when they're kept in bad weather. Sevens. The simplicity of his words struck something deep inside me. For 30 years, I'd been afraid to even say Malik's name aloud, and yet, here it lived. Spoken, sung, remembered, woven into the daily rhythm of this place. As the sun began to sink, the mural seemed to glow brighter, the blues deepening into gold. I stood there in silence, the river murmuring its strange, eternal song, and for the first time since that terrible day, I didn't feel alone beside the water. but that fragile piece shattered when tires crunched against gravel, and I turned to see Caleb's SUV pulling up, with Aisha stepping out beside him, her smile sharp as glass. Caleb's black SUV came barreling down the gravel road, kicking up a storm of dust that swirled across the courtyard. The music stopped. Even the children near the water froze. Doors slammed. First Caleb's, then Aisha's, sharp and deliberate. She emerged in a tailored cream suit that didn't belong anywhere near paint or river mud, phone in one hand, attitude in the other. "Mom," Caleb called, voice clipped, that same tone his father used when he wanted control of the room. "You can't just wander off like this. We've got people waiting." Sevens. Aisha didn't wait for pleasantries. "Mrs. Mitchell," she said with a smile polished enough to cut glass. "I hear you've met the tenants. Charming, aren't they? But we need to keep things professional. The developers are ready to make an offer. This week." Sevens. "Tenants," I repeated, the word foreign and bitter on my tongue. "You make them sound like intruders." "Sevens." She tilted her head, unbothered. "They're good people, but this structure isn't sustainable. The city needs revitalization, not nostalgia. We're talking $25 million, full cash. That's a legacy your husband would be proud of." Sevens. Her voice was honey over poison. Around us, the residents, veterans, mothers, children, stood silently. The mural loomed behind me, Malik's face glowing in the afternoon sun, watching the confrontation unfold. Caleb moved closer. "Mom, Aisha's right. This place looks nice now, but it's a liability. No inspections, no safety codes, no—" "Sevens." "Stop." The word came out louder than I intended, sharp enough to startle even myself. "You think I don't know what this place costs? I buried my son because of that river. Caleb. I buried my husband's dreams in the same ground you're standing on. Don't tell me about liability." Sevens. Aisha's expression didn't falter, but her eyes hardened. "Emotions don't build neighborhoods, Mrs. Mitchell. Money does. Growth does. Your husband understood that, or else he wouldn't have kept this secret from you for 3 decades. Sevens. The words sliced through me. You knew about this? Sevens. Of course, she said smoothly. We found the papers in the county archives. Marcus purchased this property under a charitable trust. Illegally outdated, by the way. Once it's dissolved, the land reverts to the heirs. You and Caleb. She paused, savoring the word heirs like it was a prize. Marisol stepped forward then, her presence calm but firm. That trust is valid, she said. Dr. Marcus insured it. Every document is in order. Sevens. Aisha turned to her, that smile sharpening again. And you are? Sevens. I'm the director here. Sevens. Well, Aisha replied, glancing around. Director, it looks like your lease just expired. Sevens, the crowd murmured. The air thickened. Somewhere in the distance, a single drumbeat echoed from the studio, slow and steady, like defiance wrapped in rhythm. Caleb looked at me, his face torn between loyalty and fear. Mom, please, don't make this harder than it has to be. Sevens. I met his eyes, and for a moment, I saw the little boy who used to trail after Malik by the riverbank, begging to throw one more stone. It's already harder than you can imagine, I said quietly. Aisha sighed, lowering her voice, but not her weapon. I understand your attachment. Truly. But you've done your grieving. It's time to let go. The river doesn't need another ghost story. Sevens. Behind her, the mural shimmered in the light, Malik's painted smile catching the reflection of the river like a challenge. I squared my shoulders. No, I said. Steady now. It doesn't need another ghost story. It needs someone to remember. Sevens. Aisha blinked, caught off guard by the steel in my voice. For the first time, she looked uncertain. The drumbeat grew louder. Every head in the courtyard turned toward me. And for a moment, even the wind seemed to wait. Before I could find words to answer Aisha, a slow voice cut through the tension from the back of the crowd. The trust isn't expired, it said. It's eternal, like the man who made it. Sevens. All heads turned. Rolling toward us in a wheelchair was Anthony Reed, the elderly lawyer Marcus had once helped. His gray hair glistened under the sunlight, his suit pressed sharp enough to remind you that some kinds of dignity never retire. Behind him, Theo pushed carefully, humming a tune that broke the silence like a thread of calm. Anthony stopped beside Marisol, pulling a leather folder from his lap. "Forgive the interruption, Mrs. Mitchell," he said, his tone equal parts respect and authority. I figured now was as good a time as any to set the record straight. Sevens. Aisha's smile flickered. And you are... Sevens. Anthony Reed. I drafted the legal foundation for the Mitchell House Community Trust 15 years ago, under Dr. Marcus's direction. It's fully registered, renewed, and audited twice by the IRS. He opened the folder with practiced ease. The property isn't up for sale. Not now. Not ever. Unless every living resident votes unanimously to dissolve the trust, which, judging by the crowd, won't be happening today. Sevens. A low murmur rippled through the people around us. Someone clapped once, tentative but loud. Aisha's cheeks stiffened. Caleb looked like the ground had shifted beneath him. Mrs. Mitchell, Anthony continued, turning to me. Your husband did this to protect the soul of the city. He said he couldn't stop the river, but he could stop greed from drowning what little humanity was left. Sevens. Aisha scoffed, her composure cracking. That's romantic, Mr. Reed, but outdated. The city needs progress. You think murals and drum circles can pay for heating or food? This isn't charity. It's negligence. Sevens. Marisol stepped forward again, voice calm but sharp as a blade. This isn't charity. It's community. You don't measure worth by profit margins. Sevens. The lawyer nodded. Exactly what Marcus said. Seven. Caleb threw up his hands. So what? We're just supposed to let the house rot. Let Mom waste her retirement babysitting strangers. That's not legacy. That's insanity. Sevens. The words hit like a slap, but I didn't flinch. You think I can't decide what matters anymore, Caleb? That age makes me blind. Your father spent 30 years healing people here while you were building condos in the suburbs. Which one of you do you think built something that lasts? Sevens. For the first time, my son had no reply. He looked at the mural again, at Malik's blue smile, and then away. Aisha stepped closer, lowering her voice into that smooth, commanding register that had probably closed hundreds of deals. Mrs. Mitchell, I know you're grieving, but this property could fund scholarships, foundations, real change. Selling isn't betrayal. It's strategy. Sevens. I leaned in until I could see my reflection in her perfect lip gloss. No, darling. Selling this would be betrayal. My husband didn't build this place to make people disappear. He built it so they could finally be seen. Sevens. A few people in the crowd clapped again, louder this time. The rhythm of hands grew into a steady beat, the same slow tempo as the drums from the studio. Theo started tapping his foot. Someone else joined in. Aisha looked around, realizing the crowd was slipping from her control. "This isn't over," she hissed, turning to Caleb. "Tell her she's making a mistake." Sevens. But Caleb didn't. He stared at me with something complicated. Anger, confusion, maybe a hint of shame. For the first time in years, I saw my son not as the boy who'd lost a brother, but as a man afraid of losing his foundation. Anthony closed his folder. "You may proceed with your plans, Mrs. Mitchell," he said quietly. "But legally, this house stands. It stands because Marcus built it on truth." Sevens. Aisha's heels clicked furiously against the pavement as she stalked toward the car, muttering under her breath. Caleb followed more slowly, head low. The people didn't cheer. They didn't need to. The silence that followed wasn't victory. It was protection, sacred and heavy, like the hush after a sermon. The mural shimmered against the water, and for a fleeting moment, I could almost hear Marcus's voice inside that rhythm of drums. "You did good, Ellie girl. Now hold the line." While the argument simmered in the courtyard, a low thrum of drums drifted from the back of the house, steady, insistent, refusing to bow to the noise. The rhythm had started as background sound, but now it filled the air like an answer to all the shouting. I turned and saw Jordan, my youngest, sitting cross-legged among a half-circle of teenagers, hands moving over a djembe. His eyes were closed, sweat glistening on his forehead, body swaying as if he was channeling something older than words. For a moment, the courtyard stilled. Even Aisha's sharp breath softened against the beat. The sound wasn't loud, but it carried weight, like heartbeat and prayer tangled together. "Jordan," I whispered, stepping closer. He looked up, eyes clear for the first time in years. "Mom," he said simply, "this is what Dad built. Not walls, not paperwork, rhythm." Sevens. One of the boys handed him a second drum, and Jordan motioned for me to sit. "Come on," he urged, smiling the same crooked grin Marcus used to give me when he was about to do something impossible. "Just feel it." Sevens. I hesitated, feeling Aisha's gaze burn behind me, but I sat anyway. My palms met the skin of the drum, cool and taut. Jordan began a slow pattern. Ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum. I followed, clumsy at first, then steadier. Each beat landed like a confession, a wordless apology between mother and son. The veterans joined in from their benches, tapping canes and clapping hands. Children near the mural clattered spoons against paint cans. Even Theo began humming along, his voice deep and kind. The rhythm grew until the courtyard pulsed with life, every sound syncing to the next, 40 hearts keeping time with one another. Aisha tried to interrupt, shouting over the drums. "This doesn't change anything. You can't build a city on noise." But her voice was swallowed by the beat, Caleb watched, frozen between us, torn by a rhythm he couldn't control. Then Jordan stood, raising his voice above the drums without stopping his hands. "You don't understand," he said to Aisha, to Caleb, to the city itself. "This isn't noise. It's healing. This is what Dad taught me. He said, if the pain doesn't move, it rots. So we move it. We play it out. We drum until it learns to breathe again." Sevens. His words broke something open in me. I saw flashes of him as a boy, silent at Malik's funeral, fists clenched, jaw trembling. For years he'd drowned his grief in alcohol in soundproof rooms. Now here he was, turning it into rhythm that made the world lean in and listen. Aisha shook her head, but her voice faltered. "You're all delusional." "Sevens?" Jordan smiled gently. "Maybe, but at least we're delusional together." "Sevens." Laughter rippled through the group, quick and raw, the kind that feels like release. Even Caleb cracked a smile, brief but real. The drums softened into a slow heartbeat again, fading, but not gone. I reached for Jordan's arm, squeezing it. "You've got your father's hands," I said. He looked at me, the grief and pride mingling in his eyes. "No, Mom. I've got yours too." Sevens. For the first time since Marcus's death, I felt something inside me unclench. Not forgiveness yet, but space for it to grow. The sound of the drums lingered in the air, vibrating through the courtyard, through our bones, through the mural's painted smile, until everything, every hurt, every word, moved in rhythm together. When the last beat of the drum faded, the courtyard fell into a hush so complete it was almost sacred. The only sound left was the whisper of the Detroit River and the flutter of paint-chipped prayer flags in the breeze. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, from somewhere near the steps, Pearl Brooks, Theo's mother, the woman who ran the kitchen, spoke up with a voice that trembled but carried power. "Dr. Marcus used to say," she began, "that the world breaks in public, but it heals in kitchens, gardens, and music halls. He believed this house was where that healing starts." Sevens. The crowd nodded. Some clapped softly. Even the teenagers with drums lowered their heads in quiet respect. But Aisha wasn't done. She stepped forward again, reclaiming her stage. "Beautiful words," she said, her tone sweet as syrup but twice as heavy. "But poetry doesn't pay bills. Look around. Half this structure violates code. The roof leaks. The wiring's a hazard. And you want to hold on to this sanctuary of rust." Her eyes swept across the faces in the crowd, veterans, mothers, children, and then landed on me. "You're letting sentimentality destroy what could be a beacon of progress." Sevens. I walked toward her, feeling the ground solid beneath my feet for the first time all day. Progress for who? Aisha. The people already living here, or the ones who can afford to buy them out? Sevens. Her jaw tightened. "For everyone," she snapped. "Revitalization means growth. The city changes, Mrs. Mitchell. Either you move with it, or it leaves you behind." Sevens. "Funny," I said quietly. "That's exactly what people told us when they closed the factory, when they tore down our schools, when they called our neighborhoods blighted. Growth that forgets its roots isn't progress. It's rot, wearing perfume."
Sevens. A few gasps rippled through the crowd. Caleb turned toward Aisha, clearly uneasy. She has a point, he muttered, but Aisha shot him a glare sharp enough to cut through bone. Enough, she said. We're not doing this circus any longer. Caleb, get in the car. Sevens. But my son didn't move. His eyes were fixed on the mural, on Malik's painted face glowing against the dusk. Aisha, maybe we should slow down, he said softly. Dad clearly had a plan for this place. Maybe we need to understand it before... Sevens. Before what? She interrupted.
Before we lose the only real opportunity we've ever had. This isn't about ghosts, Caleb. It's about the future. Sevens. I stepped closer until we stood almost nose to nose. You talk about the future, Aisha, but I'm looking at one right now. Children laughing, veterans rebuilding, families healing. That's a future worth keeping. Sevens. Her smile thinned, brittle as glass. You think you've won because you have a few drums and a sob story. You can't save Detroit with feelings. Sevens. I didn't look away. No, I said. But we can start. Sevens. A pulse of applause spread through the courtyard, soft at first, then steady, like the rhythm had found its way back. Jordan picked up his drum again, tapping a gentle heartbeat that echoed in the stillness. Aisha turned on her heel and walked toward the car, her heels striking the pavement like punctuation marks. Caleb followed after her, torn between loyalty and shame. When they drove off, the dust rose again, but this time it didn't choke me. It shimmered in the sunset like something freed. I turned back to the mural, Malik's blue smile gleaming against the fire of the sky, and for the first time in 30 years, I smiled back. What I didn't know then was that the truth, the deepest, rawest truth, was waiting for me on a video my husband recorded by that very river, just weeks before he died. That night, the house was quiet, too quiet. Everyone had gone home, and only the hum of the river outside filled the silence. I sat alone in Marcus's old office, the faint scent of cedar and coffee still clinging to the air. On the desk sat a plain envelope, marked in his familiar handwriting. For Ellie, when she's ready. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a tablet wrapped in an old handkerchief. When I pressed play, the screen lit up with the soft glow of sunset over the Detroit River. Marcus stood there, older, thinner, but unmistakably him. His flannel shirt flapping in the wind, the water gleaming gold behind him. Ellie, he began, voice low and steady. If you're watching this, I'm gone. I've imagined this moment for 30 years. Me telling you the truth, and you finally hearing it. He took a deep breath, eyes glistening. You've blamed yourself all this time for Malik's death, but it wasn't you. It was me. Sevens. The room spun. I gripped the desk, unable to breathe. Marcus looked away from the camera, his jaw trembling. He begged me to go down to the river, said he wanted to try his new rod before dinner. I told him yes. Just 15 minutes. I thought I'd follow right after. But I didn't. I stayed to fix the generator. And by the time I came out, the dock was empty. Sevens. He paused, the weight of 30 years pressing into every word. I couldn't tell you, Ellie. You were already drowning in guilt. I thought keeping silent was mercy. So I built this place, this house, to turn pain into purpose. Maybe that was my way of praying for forgiveness. Sevens. The screen flickered, the river behind him catching the light like fire. "If grace still lives anywhere," he said softly, "it's in the water that took our boy. Let it give you back your peace." Sevens. The video ended, but his voice stayed, echoing through the room, through me, like the steady heartbeat of a love too deep to die. I sat there long after the screen went dark, the sound of Marcus's confession still echoing inside me. 30 years of silence had finally broken, and yet the truth didn't bring anger. It brought something quieter, heavier. I pressed my palms to my face, trying to catch my breath. I had spent half my life carrying the wrong guilt, blaming myself for something I never had the power to stop. Footsteps creaked behind me. When I turned, Caleb, Naomi, and Jordan were standing in the doorway. They must have heard everything. The air between us felt fragile, like glass. "Mom," Naomi whispered, "was that really Dad?" "Sevens." I nodded, unable to speak. Jordan walked closer, his expression raw. "He told the truth," he said quietly. "All this time, he was carrying it." "Sevens." Caleb's voice was sharper. "He was hiding it. From you, from us. How could he keep something like that?" "Sevens." I turned to him. "Because he thought he was protecting us. Protecting me." "Sevens." "By lying," Caleb snapped. "By letting you drown in guilt while he built a whole new life here." "Sevens." "Not a new life," I said softly. "A second chance. For all of us." "Sevens." He looked away, his jaw tightening. Naomi touched his arm, but he shook her off, pacing. "You're justifying it, Mom. You always did. His choices, his secrets." "Sevens." "Maybe," I admitted. "But now we know why. He built this place out of regret, yes, but also out of love. And maybe that's what matters more than the lie." "Sevens." The room fell silent again. Jordan wiped his eyes. "He didn't want us to forgive him," he said. "He wanted us to keep it going." "Sevens." I looked at the mural outside the window, Malik's smile glowing in the dusk, reflected in the river's rippling gold. My husband's words returned to me. "Let the water give you back your peace." For the first time, I thought maybe it finally had. The next morning, the courtyard was restless. Word about Marcus's video had spread through the community, and by the time I stepped outside, a crowd had gathered by the mural. Some looked shocked, others curious, all waiting for answers. At the edge of it stood Aisha, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. "So that's the story now?" she said loudly. "A convenient confession to make us all feel better." "Sevens." People turned toward her. The tension in her voice sliced through the early air. "You think that video makes him a saint?" she continued, her tone dripping disbelief. "He built this place out of guilt, not grace. You're all romanticizing a lie." "Sevens." I walked closer, my hands steady, though my pulse raced. "He built it because he couldn't live with what happened, and because he refused to let tragedy end with us." "Sevens." Aisha shook her head. "You're letting emotion cloud reason, Mrs. Mitchell. This isn't healing. It's delusion." "Sevens." From behind me, Jordan's voice rang out. "You call it delusion. I call it redemption." He stepped forward, eyes burning. "My father didn't run from his mistake. He built something from it. Can you say the same about yourself?" "Sevens." Gasps rippled through the crowd.
Aisha's composure cracked for a moment, then hardened. You think this place can survive on feelings and drum beats?
Detroit doesn't need nostalgia. It needs progress. Sevens. Caleb spoke up then, voice firm. Maybe progress starts with remembering what made us human. Sevens. The crowd murmured agreement. Even the children by the dock fell silent, their eyes wide. Aisha glared at me, but there was a flicker of doubt in her eyes. This isn't over, she hissed, turning sharply toward her car. I didn't stop her. The drums began again, low, steady, defiant. The sound rolled across the courtyard like thunder, echoing off the mural, the river, the city itself. And standing there, in the middle of it all, I realized Marcus's secret hadn't broken us. It had set us free. By dusk, the sky above Detroit burned the color of copper and fire, reflecting off the river like liquid memory. The community gathered one last time that day. Every resident, every volunteer, every child who had ever learned to swim in Malik's blue. Someone had placed a small projector against the wall of the Mitchell house, and Marcus's face filled the bricks once more. Not the man of secrets and guilt, but the man who had rebuilt a dream one heartbeat at a time. A faint hush swept through the courtyard as his recorded voice echoed again. Love isn't what you feel, it's what you build. The crowd stood still, faces glistening with the light from the screen. Aisha stood at the edge of it all, her perfect composure unraveling under the weight of something she couldn't name. Caleb was beside her, silent. This is what you're holding on to, she demanded suddenly, voice cracking through the night. A ghost and a bunch of stories? Sevens? I stepped forward, the crowd parting around me. No, I said softly. We're holding on to what he built from his mistakes. You can't buy that, Aisha. You can only join it or walk away. Sevens. Her eyes flared. You think this will save the neighborhood? The city? You think murals and drums and prayers will stop the world from moving on? Sevens. I met her gaze. No. But they'll remind the world what it's leaving behind. Sevens. And then, before anyone could answer, Jordan lifted his drum and began to play, softly at first, then louder. The rhythm spread, contagious, irresistible. Hands clapped, feet stomped, laughter rippled like rain. People danced, cried, sang. Sound filled the air like redemption made audible. The mural behind me came alive in the flickering light. Malik's painted face smiling beside Marcus's shadow on the wall. Father and son united by brushstrokes and forgiveness. I raised my hands, letting the rhythm move through me, through everyone. Caleb hesitated at the edge of the circle. Aisha pulled his arm, but he didn't move. He looked at me, then at the mural, then back at the people dancing in the dirt to the sound of his father's dream. His voice trembled, but his decision didn't. I'm staying. Sevens. Aisha froze, her face collapsing under disbelief. You can't mean that. Sevens. I do, he said. I can't build condos over my brother's face. Sevens. Her silence was louder than any argument. She turned, heels crunching against gravel, and walked toward the darkening street. When the music finally slowed, only the sound of the river remained. I stood before the mural, breathless, exhausted, alive. Marcus's voice echoed again in my mind. Let the water give back what it stole. What none of us knew then was that the river was about to do exactly that. One last gift, waiting beneath the morning sun. The next morning broke softer than I expected. Gold light spilling through the broken blinds, the faint hum of the city, waking up beyond the river. The chaos of the night before had settled into something quieter, steadier, like the air itself was exhaling after holding its breath for too long. I made coffee in the kitchen that Marcus and I had once repainted together. His paint job crooked, my patience thinner than the brush strokes. But now the walls seemed to hum with a life of their own. When I stepped outside, the whole neighborhood smelled of rain and smoke and new beginnings. The river glistened, restless but forgiving. Children were already gathering for morning swim lessons, laughing as they carried buckets of water from the dock to the garden for irrigation. Jordan was there too, his drum balanced on his knee, as he led them in rhythm exercises before diving into lessons. Each beat of the drum felt like a thank you whispered to the river. Caleb stood nearby, hands in his pockets, the weight of years softening in his eyes. He looked at me the way he hadn't since he was 12, like he was seeing his mother, not just the woman who carried too much sorrow. "You really think we can keep this going?" he asked quietly. I smiled. "I don't think we have a choice anymore. This isn't just a project. It's a heartbeat, and it belongs to everyone now." "Sevens," he nodded, watching the children splash near the dock. "Dad would have loved this." "Sevens, he does," I said softly. "In his own way, he's still here." Sevens. At that moment, something in the water caught the morning sun, a glimmer near the shallow bend of the river. Theo waded in, laughing as he fished it out. When he lifted his hand, the light sparkled off what looked like an old brass key, rusted but intact. "Found this in the sand," he shouted. "Looks like it belongs to the house." "Sevens." I took it from him, warm from his palm. On the handle, carved faintly, were 2 letters. M. M. Marcus Mitchell. The river had given something back. Not just a relic, but a sign. I held the key against my chest, and for the first time in 3 decades, the ache inside me wasn't sharp. It was steady. It was alive. By noon, the courtyard of the Mitchell house was alive again, the kind of alive that vibrated through every wall and window pane. The children had finished their swim lessons and were now gathered under the mural, dripping water and sunshine, their laughter ringing like bells. Marisol was directing volunteers as they hung new wind chimes made from bottle caps and copper wire, each one singing with the breeze. Caleb was working beside Jordan, hammering new boards for the deck. Watching them, I realized I hadn't seen them share a task since they were boys. Caleb's shirt clung to his back with sweat, but his face carried something lighter, freer. "Dad would have hated my hammering," he joked. Jordan laughed, the sound full and unguarded. "He would have made you start over twice." Sevens. I sat with Theo and Pearl at one of the picnic tables, sorting through the box of Marcus's letters. There were still dozens unread, but I no longer felt rushed. Each envelope was a thread, leading me not backward, but deeper, into the living history of what he'd built. I decided to turn the collection into a project. The Mitchell Archives, a space where every story, every voice from this community could live. Photos, interviews, songs, drum patterns, even recipes. A living memory, not a memorial. Pearl reached for one of the letters dated just 3 years ago. She read aloud softly. "If love can outlast grief, it must have rhythm, steady enough to hold the broken." Sevens. That sounds just like him, I whispered. From somewhere near the river, the drums began again, slow and reverent this time, like the world keeping time with a prayer. Even Aisha's absence no longer felt like a shadow. Maybe someday she'd understand what this place really meant. Maybe she wouldn't. But the river didn't care who believed in its redemption. It just kept moving, carrying everything forward. Caleb called out from the dock. "Mom, we could use your help over here." "Sevens?" I smiled and rose, brushing sawdust from my hands. The air shimmered with warmth, music, and memory. And as I walked toward my sons, toward the sound of their laughter mingling with the drums, I realized that for the first time in my life, I wasn't returning to the past. I was standing fully in the present Marcus had dreamed for us. That evening, the Mitchell house glowed with golden light. The walls that once echoed with grief now pulsed with conversation and music. Families from the neighborhood had gathered for the first community dinner since Marcus's story came to light. The tables were crowded with food: cornbread, collard greens, catfish, and sweet tea poured into mismatched glasses. Children chased each other between the benches, laughter spilling through open windows, while the older folks tapped along to the soft rhythm of drums coming from the back room. When the last dish was served, Marisol stood at the front and clinked her spoon against a glass. "Before we eat," she said, "we honor those who brought us here. Dr. Marcus Mitchell, whose dream became our refuge, and Mrs. Ellaner Mitchell, who came back to finish it." Sevens. Applause rippled through the hall, warm and honest. I stood reluctantly, my heart pounding. "Thank you," I said, my voice trembling. "But this isn't about me. It's about all of us." My husband once wrote that the river only takes, but I think he was wrong. It gives, too. It gives if you listen long enough. "Sevens?" Theo raised his glass. "To listening," he said, and the whole room echoed the toast. As we ate, people shared stories. A veteran named Curtis spoke about how Marcus had taught him to garden, to calm his panic attacks. A mother told us her little boy learned to swim here and no longer feared water. Even Caleb shared a story, his voice hesitant at first, then sure. "I used to think Dad's silence was distance," he said, glancing toward me. "Now I know it was his way of building something bigger than words. I just hope we can keep building, too." Sevens. The moment hung in the air, tender and raw. For years, my family had been fractured by the things we didn't say. But tonight, under the soft glow of lanterns and the steady hum of drums, I felt those cracks start to close. When dinner ended, Jordan began to play again, just a slow, gentle rhythm. People joined in one by one, clapping, humming, swaying. Outside, the river reflected the music, like it had been waiting for this song all along. For the first time, grief and joy didn't fight inside me. They danced. After everyone had gone home, I lingered on the porch long after the lights dimmed inside. The night was cool, heavy with the scent of rain and soil, and the river shimmered under the moon, like a silver ribbon unraveling toward forever. I could still hear faint drumming from somewhere deep within the house. Jordan's hands, steady as heartbeat, refusing to let silence take back what we'd reclaimed. I sat with Marcus's letters spread out across my lap, the last few unopened. Each one felt like a pulse, still carrying the rhythm of a man who tried to speak through time. I chose one dated just a month before he died. The ink had bled slightly at the edges, as if his hand had trembled. Ellie, if grief is a storm, then love must be the bridge. I've learned that the two can't exist without each other. One keeps us human, the other keeps us moving. If you ever come back here, and I believe you will, don't come to forgive me. Come to finish what we started.
Sevens. The words blurred as my tears fell. I pressed the page to my heart and whispered, "We're finishing it, Marcus. We are." Sevens. From down by the dock, the faint voices of children drifted upward. They'd returned to float paper lanterns on the water, small glowing orbs gliding over the surface of the river. On each one, they had written a single word: hope, home, family, forgive. The current carried them slowly toward the city lights, reflections rippling across the water like 100 tiny suns. Caleb joined me on the porch, quiet and barefoot, hands in his pockets. "Dad would have loved this," he murmured. I smiled through the ache. He does. He's in every drumbeat, every splash, every breath of this place. Sevens. We stood side by side, watching the lanterns drift farther out. For the first time in decades, I didn't see the river as the thing that took from me. I saw it as what Marcus had always seen, a mirror that reflected whatever you dared to put into it. And as the last lantern disappeared into the horizon, I realized the story wasn't ending. It was asking to be told, in color, in sound, in memory, for everyone who needed to remember what love can rebuild. A week later, the Mitchell house was busier than ever. What used to be quiet halls now buzzed with the rhythm of rebirth, hammering from the new workshop, laughter from the children's art room, the steady heartbeat of drums echoing through the walls. The city had started paying attention. Local reporters came by, cameras flashing beneath the mural of Malik's blue. They wanted to know how a forgotten building by the Detroit River had become the center of something alive again. I stood beside Marisol in the community office, now transformed into the Mitchell archives. Shelves lined the walls, photo albums, recordings, journals, paintings, even broken instruments repaired with care. We'd turned Marcus's letters into an exhibit, each one framed beside a photograph of the people he'd helped. His words weren't just personal anymore. They were history. When school groups visited, I told them what Marcus had written. "The only thing stronger than loss is the story you build from it." Then I'd ask them to add their own. Letters, drawings, voice notes, to the growing digital archive. Every story found a place here, no matter how small. Jordan ran the music room now, teaching drumming therapy sessions for veterans and kids. Caleb handled the finance board, coordinating donations and city partnerships. Even Naomi came on weekends to teach photography workshops. We'd each found a way to rebuild, together and apart. Sometimes, when the day ended and the last drum quieted, I'd walk down to the river and press my hand to the mural. The paint was warm under the sun, the blues and golds shimmering like breath. Detroit was still scarred, still struggling. But here, on this little patch of water and memory, healing wasn't just an idea. It was real. On the last Sunday of summer, we held a celebration, a festival Marcus had dreamed of, but never lived to see. We called it The River Remembers, and by noon, the courtyard was overflowing. Food trucks lined the street, children painted faces beneath the mural, and music spilled out onto the sidewalks. The city, that once forgot this place, now came to honor it. Theo led the opening ceremony,
his voice carrying over the river. "This house was built on grief," he said, "but grief gave us rhythm. It taught us to listen to what hurts, and to heal it out loud." The crowd cheered. Even the mayor was there, her hands swaying gently to the drums. When it was my turn to speak, I stood by the mural of Malik's blue and felt every heartbeat of the community pulsing around me. 30 years ago, I began, I thought the river had stolen everything I loved. But I was wrong. It was keeping it safe, waiting for me to come back. My voice trembled, but it didn't break. This isn't a memorial. It's a promise that we'll keep telling the stories that built this city, even the ones born from pain.
Sevens. Jordan's drumming began softly, joined by the laughter of children and the rhythm of hundreds of hands clapping in unison. Lanterns from the workshop floated upward, catching the wind like prayers made visible.
As the music swelled, Caleb reached for my hand. "You did it, Mom," he said. I squeezed his fingers. "No," I whispered. "We did." Sevens. The sky turned gold above the river, and for a moment, the whole city seemed to breathe in rhythm. Detroit's heart, steady and alive again. As the festival faded into twilight, I found myself back at the dock, the same stretch of river that had once defined my nightmares. The lanterns floated lazily downstream, their reflections trembling on the water's surface, like tiny souls finding rest. I sat on the wooden edge, the boards warm beneath me, and listened to the quiet rhythm of drums drifting from afar. The air smelled of sweetgrass and smoke, and for the first time, it didn't carry the sting of memory. It carried peace. Malik's mural glowed in the distance under soft string lights, his painted smile catching the shimmer of the river like he was laughing again, free from the weight of tragedy. Jordan joined me, barefoot, his drum tucked under his arm. "You okay, Mom?" he asked. I smiled, feeling tears prick the corner of my eyes, but not from sorrow. "Yeah," I said. "I think I finally am." Sevens. We sat there for a while, not speaking, just breathing, letting the rhythm of the river fill the spaces words could never reach. I thought about Marcus, about the letters, the lies, the love, the way he'd turned his guilt into grace. Sometimes healing doesn't look like forgetting. It looks like staying, rebuilding, forgiving. I looked out at the glowing lanterns drifting farther into the dark and whispered, almost to myself, "He gave this place back to us." Then I turned to Jordan and asked softly, "You think people ever get second chances like this?" Sevens. He smiled. "Only if they're brave enough to come back." Sevens. If it were you, if the place that broke you called you home again, would you have the courage to answer? The night settled over the Mitchell house like a blessing. The last of the lanterns disappeared into the horizon, and the drums quieted until all that was left was the whisper of the Detroit River and the hum of crickets in the grass. I stood alone beneath the mural, tracing the outlines of Malik's painted smile, the deep blues and golds glowing faintly in the moonlight. It felt less like a picture now, and more like a mirror, showing me who I'd become. For so many years, I believed grief was a prison I had to outlive. But standing there, I finally understood what Marcus had tried to teach me. Grief isn't something you escape. It's something you learn to build from. The river that took had also given. It had carved me open, yes, but it had also carried me back to myself. Detroit had changed, and so had I. The pain, the loss, the silence. They hadn't disappeared, but they had turned into rhythm, into stories, into hands building something worth keeping. I looked up at the sky, where the city lights bled into the stars, and whispered, "Thank you, Marcus, for saving us all in your own way." Sevens. Maybe that's what love really is. Not perfection, not permanence, but persistence. The courage to keep showing up even when the water runs cold. If it were you, would you have stayed to rebuild what once broke you, or would you have walked away? If this story touched you, if you believe healing can grow from heartbreak, please like, comment, and share it so others can feel a little less alone. Because sometimes all we need is to know that even the deepest wounds can turn into something beautiful.